Before I start, maybe I can just say a few words about our center itself, okay? Today, myself here, as well as my colleague Winnie sitting over there, and actually we are responsible for two centers here in HKUST. The first center, as you can see, it's called the Tanoto Center for Asia Family Business and Entrepreneurship, okay? And the second center is actually Thompson Center for Business Studies, okay? We're very, very fortunate we were able to get some sponsor for our centers itself. So our centers are actually partially funded by these sponsors itself. It's also important that we demonstrate to the outside world we are actually having the community involved. You know, it's not just the sums of money that are involved. So this is very, very important. Before I talk about this a little bit, the case center is also very, very interesting because one method of doing research, instead of the quantitative, we can do the qualitative, and you might look at what Eisenhardt of Stanford has done. Actually, and Winnie will be doing a part of the presentation. We actually use the case method to actually do the part of our research, and so this is one of the things. Okay, let me just spend a little bit of time on this center itself. This center is about 7 years old at the moment, and we have three basic objectives for this center. The first objective is, of course, as part of a university, education. Okay, education is very, very important, and we focus on both the degree programs as well as the non-degree programs. And the degree programs, we prefer to do it. This is the executive MBA program as well as the MBA program, and these are elective courses because when you have an elective program, people attend because they want to attend. And they're basically geared primarily for people that are in the family business itself, or advisors to families, okay? Or some, perhaps in the future, would like to be a private banker and they want to understand how families operate, and so this is the objective itself. We also have custom programs. We actually have people come to us and we design programs specific for them, whether it's the private banks, EY, and a few others very similar. So we design programs specifically to meet their client needs. And I think one of our advantages that as a university, we appear to be neutral. Okay, so we're not promoting. If EY is promoting a program, but we're basically providing the content, and we don't take a stand in terms of that respect. So that's number one. Number two is that actually we do research. Okay, we do two types of research. We do research that are for academic purposes, and later on Winnie will actually present part of our research effort. This is, I would say, work in progress itself. Okay, but we also like to do publishing for the mass media, because very often academic research is not necessarily read by practitioners, okay? So this is part of the problem, and in fact, part of my goal for being at this university, because I actually come from a practitioner's world, and so I'm trying to bridge the gap between practitioners as well as academics, because I think both can contribute a lot, provided they can understand each other, okay? So this is one of the things. So mass media, whether it's the Common Press or even Forbes magazine, we do quite a bit of that. So this is the second thing. The third area of our focus is events. Okay, so we actually have events from time to time. We bring, and you'll see in this brochure, we have various events. Several years ago, we had this man over here. He is, Jack Ma of Alibaba. He's a very, very interesting fellow. He was one of our keynote speakers. I asked him if you can speak for 20 minutes and have 20 minutes of Q&A. He says, Roger, can I speak 5 minutes and I'll just have Q&A? And that thing, 2020, that's 40 minutes. It went on for an hour and a half. Q&A went on for an hour and a half. He's an amazing fellow, by the way. So if you ever get a chance to listen to him, you should. And he recently was at the World Economic Forum. It's actually can be downloaded. We also sometimes do events with other organizations, such as World Economic Davos. We call it the Summer Davos in China itself. So we do this from time to time. Our most recent one was actually very, very interesting. We brought in half-day event. We had 2 panel sessions, and one was what we call the current generation, and the next panel was the next generation. So Winnie was the moderator for one of them, and I was the moderator for the other. And because they're addressing different issues, the current generation's view of secession is very, very different than the next generation's view of. And we specifically brought in people that actually don't necessarily want to join the family business itself, okay? And so this is also very, very interesting. And so again, these events, we try to bring both academics as well as practitioners. So this is our center itself. The word entrepreneurship, actually our focus is on more or less entrepreneurship within the family. For families to survive, family business to survive for a long time, you really have to keep changing your business model. And look what happened to Kodak. Here's a long surviving company. Where are they today? And of course, in a shorter sense, BlackBerry, although recently I heard them talk about the new chairman of BlackBerry, he happens to be ethnic Chinese, okay? So one has to change all the time. If you don't change, the chance of survival, for the business anyway, is more complex itself, okay? And of course, being in Hong Kong, we tend to focus on ethnic Chinese. Okay, so this is again, and when we say ethnic Chinese, we're really talking about Chinese on a global basis. So we don't necessarily differentiate Chinese from mainland China, Chinese from San Francisco or Southeast Asia itself. Okay, and Winnie will probably share a little bit more. We're actually nowadays even looking at comparisons between ethnic Chinese and non-ethnic Chinese. And maybe Winnie can, or you want me to just mention. For example, one of our current studies, we're actually comparing overseas Chinese family businesses to the so-called diaspora Jewish family businesses. So this is an area that both of us have been invited to go to Tel Aviv this May to give a presentation over there. So this is just by way of introduction. Let me see. So the title of our talk is Breaking the Chinese Curse, Wealth Doesn't Go Beyond 3 Generations. Okay, I know people are saying, well, but we want to focus specifically on the ethnic Chinese. Okay, so we're just going to cover a few topics itself. Okay, here globally, as stated earlier, family businesses and family wealth are inextricably linked, intertwined. Okay. So, very often, where does the wealth come from in the first place? It's actually from family business itself. I'm talking about legitimate wealth, okay? Legitimate wealth itself. Family businesses are complex. So most of you already know that, but I'll run through it very, very quickly, okay? Then regard the distinct characteristics of Chinese family businesses as opposed to others, okay? And also we'll talk specifically on the ethnic Chinese element itself, okay? They're similar, I'm sure, to some of the other areas. Winnie will specifically talk about, our current findings. More importantly, are those that manage to go beyond 3 generations. What are some of the distinct characteristics itself, okay? And also challenges that are facing Chinese family businesses or Chinese wealth management, wealth preservation. So again, this is something we'll talk about, okay? Why is family business important, okay? First of all, family business is pervasive globally, okay? And it's really the key generator of wealth itself, Okay, so this is one of the reasons. Complex, very, very complex. And I'll again touch upon that a little bit, particularly when you have a generational transition, whether it's first to second, second to third. In fact, second to third is very, very complex, and third to fourth is even more complex. Okay, so this is again myth, common myth. Small. You know, the perception is it's always very, very small. And we'll show you that not necessarily so, as you people already know, right? No growth, okay? Limited capital. There's no way for them to raise capital, okay? Nepotism. Lack of opportunities for non-family members itself, okay? By the way, someone told me recently, nepotism actually came from, the notion of nepotism came from the church. The priests were having these so-called illegitimate children. And they said, oh, this is my nephew, this is my nephew. So that's where the word nepotism came about. Okay. Generational, always generational conflicts. The answer is probably true, but can we avoid some of these things? Okay, so this is, okay, look at this. Let me just give you some statistics. Okay, look at this, United States. And of course, Walmart, Ford, New York Times, Cargill's agriculture, Mars, candy bars. See, these are all family businesses. China, look at this, 70% of GDP. India, Germany, Chile, Korea, Albert, Korea, Sweden, Walmart, 55% of the market capitalization. Hong Kong, look at that, 15 families, 84%. 2/3 of the listed companies are controlled by family. Control, really, we're talking about 50+%. One exception, the major family here is the Li family, Li Daxing, or Li Jiaxing. He actually, the company he controls less than 50%. But there's also the pyramid concept. You know, the cash flow rights versus the voting rights are quite different, okay? Indonesia, look at this. 3/4 of the listed by market capitalization. Ethnic Chinese. Sometimes this is why we are very, very interested in studying the Jewish family concept. Because, you know, the total population in Indonesia, as far as ethnic Chinese is concerned, is probably less than 6%. But look what you do. You control 3/4. People don't like that, right? They're jealous of you. So this is one of the issues. Philippines. Ayala is not ethnic Chinese, but one family is Spanish, you know. Okay. Family businesses are very, very complex. Now, I think most of you probably know this thing, the three circle model. And when family business first started out, it's actually all these three circles that are converged into a single circle. As you start moving onward, to the next generation, these circles start to drift gradually apart. And when you start drifting apart, look what happens. Look at this. There's 7 different categories. Now let's look at this. Here, this means you're a family member, you're in the business, managing the business, and you have ownership. So now, why the complexity? Look at this. Number 4. You're a family member, you have ownership, but you're not in the management. So what happens when the company car comes to pick up your cousin and takes cousin's kids to school? And that's charged to the company, but you have no say in the business, you have to pay for it, right? This is why conflicts arise. If I'm in number 7, I take you out for dinner, I sign a check, right? I charge it to the company. So if I'm here, why should you pay for a private dinner if it's not related to the business itself? So this is why you have these conflicts. And of course, as a generation, as you move from second to third generation, these things drift apart. And this is why you have lots of problems. Okay? And by the way, you know, if you count it as 7, the other issue is that, although I don't really emphasize it, is that people affiliate family business as the glue that keeps the family together. But what if you sell the business, dispose the business? How do you keep the family together? Or should the family just dissipate itself? And you mentioned the word family office. You know, we actually feel that family office is one method to actually keep the family together itself. Okay. Okay. This is, you know, wealth doesn't go beyond 3 generations. It has beyond 3 generations. I know other cultures have similar sayings, but again, you know, the first generation create the wealth, second generation enjoys the wealth, and the third one just destroys the wealth itself. But we're going to look at it from specifically more from an ethnic Chinese perspective. Okay. The greatest single cause for families to break up is really family wealth issues. Okay, jealousy around this and that, and we talked about the 3-circle model itself. Okay, how do you get distributed? And of course, for our culture, now it's changing very, very rapidly. Men used to get all the wealth. Daughters did not get very much, but daughters are very, very important. Why? Because daughters married to another family. Sometimes that's a good linkage. You marry upward. And so the daughter brings connection to your business. So we talk about social capital. You know, human and social capital is very, very important, particularly for us, and I'll talk about that a little bit. But the greatest single reason for families to break up, whether it's a family business or family wealth, is really wealth disputes. Okay? And I'm sure in Russia it's probably very, very similar. So. Unique characteristics, okay? I'll just, and for those coming from overseas, these may or may not be familiar with you, but I think here, okay? Most of our, you know, Confucianism is not a religion, by the way. It's a philosophy, philosophical approach, okay? And it's not just unique to Chinese, Korean, Japan, a lot of the other Asian also follow this concept of Confucianism. Okay, respect is very, very important. Okay, we have a very hierarchical type of thing. You know, for Chinese, we have 2 days out of the year we have to go pay respect to our ancestors, and we go to their grave sites. Okay, and this is very, very important. We do that. And it's also an opportunity for the family to get together and go at the same time, you pay respect, and afterwards you actually usually go and have a meal together as a family. So respect is also, and this is not just respect to the people that are dead, but respect to others, people you work with, okay? And there's a notion of face. You know, if you don't like a person, you can tell them on a one-on-one basis, but you cannot do that in front of other people, okay? Because once he loses respect in front of others, you know, what can you do anymore if he works for you, okay? Hierarchical relationships, okay? And, okay. Expect to be kind and caring, at least on surface, okay? So this is the hierarchical relationship. You know, here we have so-called relationship, father and son, even siblings, firstborn versus non-firstborn is very, very different. Okay, and of course, you know, in our society, the younger brother has to respect the older brother itself. Okay. And both Winnie and I are actually exploring some of the interesting studies. If you study the characteristics of firstborn versus subsequent born, the firstborn tend to be very structured, very disciplined, but risk averse. You think about the very successful entrepreneurs. most of them are not necessarily firstborn. By the way, 2/3 of the American presidents are firstborn. So people say, no wonder America's all screwed up. They're all firstborn, right? Okay. So again, this is something that you think about. So basically, we have 5 so-called social relationships: father, son, ruler and ruled, in other words, employer, employee, even teachers and students. Okay. In the Chinese system, you do not challenge the teacher or professors. Okay. Not openly anyway. Husband and wife. Of course, nowadays it's different. It's wife and husband. Okay. So, elderly brothers, and of course sisters and so forth. The only one that's kind of interesting is friends, especially those friends you meet in university years. I still have my friends from university, and there it's equal. It's really more equal. Other relationships, there's a ranking, okay, understood sort of ranking itself. Harmony to us is extremely important. We try to, okay? And the question is, what do we mean by harmony? So these are things that are extremely important. Relationship, or 关系, for those of you familiar with the term, okay? And trust, 信用, and all these things. So these are very basic value systems that we have. We'll give you a copy. So these are very, very important things. So these are the fundamental guiding system for us. So the question is it good or not good? And we'll show you some are very, very good and some of the things that are, okay. Collectivism versus individualism. To the Eastern people, we tend to work collectively in a family structure. To Anglo-Saxon, to us, it's very individualistic. And one way to describe this is, I like to tell people, for those of you that have been in this part of the world long enough, when Chinese go out to eat, we order food for everyone, for the entire table. Westerners, when you go to a restaurant, Western restaurant, you order individually, right? You have chicken, you have steak, you have fish. That's called individual. A Chinese going to a Western restaurant, yes, you order everything, but once the food comes out, would you like a little bit of my fish? Would you like a little? That's called collectivism. And when the Chinese go to Paris, a Michelin restaurant, and the waiters say, what are these people doing? They're cutting up the food and sharing everything. So this is, fundamentally, we're very, very different. Okay? So I just wanted to highlight some of these differences. Okay? So, and the other thing is, and I'm sure this is also true, we don't differentiate, work and family, it's all together. Okay? It's all mingled. I would hate to work in a Chinese family business as an HR manager because there's no such thing, okay? It's understood. Maybe there's someone might buy that title, but the idea of job description and everything else, Westerners love to have job description for everything one does, right? For most of us in this part of the world, we don't really emphasize that issue. And I mentioned the word face saving, okay? To us, face savings, you don't embarrass people in front of others. If you have an employee that did something wrong, you don't tell them he did something wrong in front of other employees, unless you're really getting rid of it, okay? And so face is very, very important in this respect. Okay, Chinese curse. Wealth doesn't go beyond 3 generations itself, okay? Why and what is unique about Chinese, okay? Lack sustainability model. Up to very recently, most of the Chinese businesses, if you think about it, especially in mainland China, is low labor cost. Okay? And there's very little value added itself. You can make a shirt, I can make a shirt, but mine's cheaper, whatever it is, and I'll sell it. Okay? So this is a way, and part of it is this, and I'll talk about this, is the notion that, especially overseas Chinese, we have a homeland. This is a little bit different between the Jewish people and the Chinese people. When Chinese go overseas, they always think of someday I'm going to go back to my homeland. When Chinese meet each other overseas, I guarantee you within the first 5 minutes, the conversation will say, where are you from? What we're trying to do is there a dialectical relationship? Because in China, there's so many different dialects. We're all so-called Han people, but the dialects are very, very different. You can be from a village that's, say, 100 miles away from you. You cannot even understand each other. The written language is the same, but the spoken language is totally different. In fact, our family is originally from Shanghai. Shanghainese marry local Cantonese here in Hong Kong. We consider that a mixed marriage. Actually, the food is actually quite different, okay, if you think about it, and a lot of our customs are actually quite different itself, okay? So, but when Chinese, particularly in Southeast Asia, when they go overseas, the people there, like I said, in Indonesia and so forth, they're not that friendly to Chinese, just like the Jewish people going to a different place. So the mentality is that we're always going to go back. You know, the people talk about the Jewish people, they carry all their wealth in diamonds, right? So if something happens, they can take all the diamonds and go home and leave very quick. Chinese have a very similar mentality. You don't invest for long term, just in case you have to leave very, very quickly. Okay? Of course, things are changing a little bit, but if you have that mentality, how do you have a sustainable business? This is one of the challenges. And again, hopefully things will change. But I can tell you, by the way, the name of our center is Tanoto, and Tanoto is actually Chinese in Indonesia. His real home is actually in Singapore. Okay, so he always has this fear something happens. In Indonesia, if you recall back not too long ago, they had riots against ethnic Chinese. Even in Los Angeles, when in the 70s, early 70s and so forth, they had riots. The Koreans suffered, the Chinese suffered, because the Koreans and Chinese were owners of small shops. And again, easy target and against jealousy. And this is why we are interested in studying the Jewish concept itself, okay? So this is, so lack of willingness, if you have that mentality, it tends to be a very myopic type of thing. You don't invest for long term, okay? Lack of investment, product development. This is why people think Chinese are copycats all the time, okay? Of course, things are gradually changing a little bit. Has anyone ever heard of this new company called Xiaomi? It's interesting. They're going to be the second largest smartphone provider. It only started at 2010. And already, are they innovators or are they just copycats? Okay, so it'd be very, very interesting. So the question is that lack of investment of product development, branding. Brand takes a long, long time to develop. In the old days when I was first started to teach, I asked people to name a Chinese brand that they're aware of. Now this is several years back. Everybody would say, Qingdao beer, that's it. Now, of course, there are other things. But in those days, Qingdao beer was the only brand that recognized abroad. So again, this is part of the reason itself, okay? We tend to be, social capital is extremely important. Who you know, who you don't know, and everything else, okay? And so something like that. You and I are good friends, we are willing to do business. That doesn't mean your offspring and my offspring can do business together. So again, how do you pass that on? So this is a trust, lack of trust, because you don't have brand names, you don't have real identity. If I hire someone, maybe he will know who my contacts are. He knows exactly, so he can set up a shop. In fact, many entrepreneurs, so-called entrepreneurs, used to work for other entrepreneurs, and they set up another operation. So again, lack of trust. You don't trust anyone, okay, other than your family people. And of course, male dominance itself. So female talent is not used that way. It's used differently. So, structure. Again, they didn't have the benefit of business school and so forth and so on. So, it's very, very structured. It's all very intuitive, okay? So, again, they didn't have the benefit of, structured education and everything else. Now, having said that, I recently came across a very, very interesting book. I have one of my grandsons who I think is extremely talented, but he's not very good scholastically, okay? And he just doesn't like to study, okay? So I recently came across a book. The title of the book is called Why A Students Work for C Students and B Students Work for Governments. Okay? So I bought this book thinking I should give it to him to read. Okay, he's 11 years old. So I gave it to my son to give to his son. My son took it, but he didn't give it to his son. He said if he reads this book, he's going to be a C student forever. So the question is, so again, what are we talking about in terms of talent? Birth order versus meritocracy is one of the issues, and traditionally, Chinese tend to use birth order concept itself. Okay, so this is again, you talk about family governance issues. People say Chinese don't have family governance. It's not true. We do. It's just not written. Okay, we're not very legalistic in that sense. Okay, so this is one of the issues. Lack understanding or appreciation for managing large structures. Again, without the benefit of okay. By the way, Jack Ma, the Alibaba man, he actually trashes MBA programs. He thinks it's a waste of time. Okay, he thinks real experience is more important. Okay, so again, these are some of the issues itself. Okay, let's see. Lack. We talked about succession planning. For us, a son can never go to the father and say, by the way, if you die, what's going to happen? Are you wishing me to die? This is something you never discuss. Okay? So you talk about lack of planning. A lot of these are issues here. Okay? Personal wealth and family wealth. We talk about family offices and so forth. One of the things people like to start preaching is really segregating the family wealth and from the family business wealth. Okay, because businesses can come and go, and if the business goes, if you have everything all in the business, it's all gone. So how do you segregate all that? So this is something that one needs to look at very, very carefully. Diversification. Okay, not many actually diversify their thing, and when they do diversify, it tends to follow others. You're in real estate too? Oh, is it really good? Where do you buy? In San Francisco? Okay, let me buy something in San Francisco as well. So it's not a real planned type of diversification from a business perspective. Equal inheritance, okay? For Chinese, male tend to get equal inheritance, which creates a lot of complexity, okay? This is where, next generation, if everybody has a similar amount, what happens in the next generation? Who really controls issues? Multiple relationship. It's nowadays in China or early days, single child policy. I think but no one said anything about single wife relationship. So many people have multiple wives, or let's say mistresses, which also creates a lot of complexity in inheritance. Okay. Some of the well-known families in Hong Kong, Macau, Stanley Ho, you may or may not heard of him. He's one of the families that control the casino. He had virtually the entire field to himself. He has what, 4 wives, is it? Official wives. One of the family we studied is, again, a Asian Chinese, ethnic Chinese family. the Yu family, EU, okay? And it's kind of interesting. They're into the 4th generation, and they recently wrote a book about the family. And the 2nd generation of the Yu family, they had 10 wives. 10 wives. Simultaneously, yes. And in the old days, he lived in Singapore sometimes, in Malaysia sometimes, in Hong Kong sometimes. Can you imagine how in those days, flying airplanes, it's not that convenient, right? We're talking about the 1930s, okay? And so in Hong Kong, he had 3 or 4, and they each had their own sort of house and this and that. Boy, this is a busy man. Anyway, what's very interesting, whilst they were writing this book, they discovered he had 11 wives. So he actually had 11 wives altogether. So, multiple relationship is not unusual for this part of the world. I mean, recently, even my grandfather had 2 wives. My uncle had 3 wives. Poor father only had 1 wife. And we recently had a family reunion, and we had over 100 of us all together. Just my uncle's 3 wives' offspring, so it was something, okay? So these are some of the issues. We think it's rather unique to Asians and particularly ethnic Chinese itself, okay? So I will end here, and I'll ask Winnie to continue, and I need to give you the...
Maybe no need.
No need?
I think,
They're
yeah.
recording. Yeah.
Yeah, let me just try if it's loud enough, huh?
Does she need this?
Oh, okay. Oh.
Okay, because they're recording.
Hello? Okay, good afternoon. It's my pleasure to be given this opportunity to present one of our recent research, Breaking the Curse, How Chinese Family Business Survive Beyond 3 Generations. At first, I need to re-emphasize one thing that Roger just mentioned briefly, that actually the curse, whilst does not pass beyond 3 generations, 富不过3代is not just unique to Chinese family business. Actually, it's quite common. Even the Western society have very similar sayings. For example, shirt sleeves to shirt sleeves in 3 generations. Then people may ask the question, well, if it's very common to all society, then why you study Chinese family business? So I will give you our motivation. This I'll just skip because of time. Okay, this is a diagram. Okay, we got the data from one of our Japanese friend, professor. He has been collecting data for the century-old family business in the world for a long time. So this is the latest data. Which country ranked number 1? So this is the Japan, our island neighbor. Okay, they have over 25,000 companies that are over 100 years old. And second is USA, and third is Germany, then UK, Switzerland. But the question is, where is China, right? China has the largest population in the world, but we didn't enter even into the top 10 countries. Another table, a very similar table, this is top 20 oldest family businesses in the world, okay, top 20. None of them are actually Chinese. Even top 100, top 200 oldest family businesses in the world, none of them are Chinese. So this give us a very good motivation to study, to conduct this research. We want to find out why the Chinese does not pass beyond 3 generations, and do we have any examples, successful examples that Chinese can learn from. So I will not go into this in detail because Roger already mentioned about the cultural tradition in China, which makes quite different. And the reasons for the curse, Roger also mentioned, but I need to just emphasize on one issue, is this inheritance system, which makes the big difference between the Japanese family business versus the Chinese family business. as we know that the Chinese, we have equal or near equal inheritance system amongst the male descendants, while the Japanese have so-called primogeniture, which means the firstborn son, inherits the whole estate. So, but the Japanese are quite interesting. If they don't have the firstborn son, if they even don't have the son, how can they do that? Actually, they can accept the son-in-law to inherit the business. They can even accept to adopt a son to inherit the business. But once they do that, the original blood will be no longer the original blood. So we oftentimes we regard the two family business, the Chinese family business, as banyan tree. Okay, it's big with a lot of leaves and with a lot of roots, but it cannot grow very tall. While the Japanese family business we regard as the bamboo tree. It can grow very tall but hollow inside because the original blood may be no longer there. So that's the biggest difference between a Chinese family business versus the Japanese family business. So I'll skip the rest because
Winnie, you might want to, if you have an outsider come in to take over the family business.
The thing is, I forgot to mention that the condition is you need to change your last name to the family name in order to continue the family business. So there's no original blood. It's actually the outsiders taking up the business. But because they changed the last name, then still regarded as the family business. Okay. So let's go back to our study. Okay. We have multiple, we do this using a multiple case study method. Actually, it is qualitative-based method. And I want to introduce you the selection criteria for the case company. We have 4 selection criteria. First is founded and are still controlled by the same Chinese family. Second is family members still hold the key management and board positions. Third is the company has lasted for more than 100 years. The fourth one I need to stress is, we actually set a criteria that annual turnover of those company should be greater than 100 million US dollars. So why we make this criteria? Because there are actually a lot small family business in this region, but the dynamics are quite different from the bigger businesses. So we want to really represent the modern organizational structure of the big companies, but not the small companies. That's why we set up this criteria. So at the end, after extensive search, we only find 7 Chinese family businesses in this region who are willing to for us to do the direct interview with the family business owners. I mean, thanks to Roger's connections, that we can really talk to those family business owners directly. So those 7 Chinese family businesses are simply just our sample base. Okay, we have Lian Feng, the global supply chain business, and Li Keng-Ki, it's a soy sauce company. Wing Yuan San, just Roger mentioned, who has 11 wives. Okay, Tai Cheng Cheng, IMC, and Royal Zealand. So those 4 are based in Hong Kong, and 3 are based in Singapore. So I will not go into too much detail on those 7 companies. I just skipped that. So after our extensive interview with those 7 companies, we actually concluded 3 success factors for those companies who can survive beyond 3 generations. So success factor 1 is sustainable business model. So in order to sustain, you have to reduce the risk. So one important way to reduce risk is through diversification. So one way to diversify is diversify your products. Another way is to diversify your location, right? So how to diversify your product? You have to be innovative all the time. You have to have entrepreneurial spirit throughout generations. And how to diversify through locations? You have to go global. have to globalize your business. So those 7 companies, they all diversified their products, and they all went global. So for example, Li Qian Peng, we all know maybe it's a soy sauce soy sauce company, but recently they actually entered into herbal product market, and maybe a lot of people don't know that the turnover of herbal product market actually is greater than the soy sauce business now. So they are able to diversify the businesses. So this is one success factor. They have to have sustainable business model.
Second, the Li Qian Peng itself, they're private, but their annual turnover is more than $2 billion US dollars.
Yeah.
$2 billion.
So all of our case companies are very big. Okay? Success factor 2 is there's a good balance in between the Chinese and Western values. Now through several generations, the 3rd and 4th generations of those family business, they all went abroad to study, the best practices from the West, but they themselves didn't forget the traditional Chinese system and values. So for example, again, Li Qian Peng, they have written family constitution. It's more like Western style. But what's in the family constitution? One example, they said, family members cannot divorce. Okay, if they divorce, any of the divorce, they will not get shares. They will be kicked out from the family. So this is very, very traditional family Chinese values. So this is success factor 2. Success factor 3, pruning of ownership. Pruning meaning reconcentrating of ownership. Remember just now I mentioned banyan tree. So they try to turn this banyan tree into a bamboo tree. So in the 2nd or 3rd generation of all those 7 companies, they try to reconcentrate their ownership. So one of the brothers bought out the shares from other brothers and cousins. So in this way, their ownership is able to continue through more generations. So those 3 success factors are what we found in common for those 7 companies, but there was other success factors as well. Okay, able to attract and retain external management talent, and well-defined family governance system, a long-term investment, and also they planned and implemented a successful succession very early. So those are the factors that we believe that other Chinese families, also maybe other family business in the world can learn from. So conclusion, I will skip it. It's just simply repeating the 3 success factors. Okay, the findings apply to large Chinese family business, not small one. Right? Small sample sizes because we can hardly find any other family business who are willing to really do for us to do the interview. But actually there were not so many. Even we want to interview, even we know those people, it's not fit into our criteria. So new challenges facing Chinese family businesses. Our study has greater significance and implications especially for the mainland Chinese. Okay, so 40% of listed companies are now actually family business, and 1st generation is now entering into the 2nd generation currently, and the number of family Chinese studying abroad has tripled recently. So one challenge facing is this so-called culture clash, right? So those students or the 2nd generation who went abroad, when they come back, will they still maintain the Chinese culture, or they totally forgot who they are? So those are one of the challenges. Then those 2nd generation, they may have better opportunities outside, and how to convince those people to come to the family business is a big challenge. Okay, and also how to attract the outside people to come to the family business. And last one is those so-called sunset industry. So in China, mainland China, we know that there's a lot of low-end, low-cost, and high labor industries. How to transform themselves to high value-add industry is a challenge for them. So those are the things that can leave for the current Chinese family business to think about. So this is my presentation. And thank you very much. Any questions?
We have so many, so
It has so many.
maybe we should.
Yeah.
Yeah. I just don't know what to ask because I have so many questions.
Okay.
I would ask to
individually.
Yeah,
Oh, sure. Any other? Yeah.
What
Please.
will happen if the family have only girls?
Only girls.
Sorry? Huh?
Only girls.
Only girls.
You mean the Chinese family business? Now in mainland China is a single child policy, right?
No.
So
You said you said about the succession. In
Yeah.
Japanese, they can bring the foreigner to become a member. You said in Chinese culture,
it will be
like
very
the
difficult.
female,
Uh-huh.
they inherit nothing.
Yeah.
What will happen in the family, Chinese family, the business?
Uh-huh.
They will have only girls.
Then you have another wife.
No, but the thing is because now, especially in mainland China, we have single child policy. So if you have a daughter, still the owners are thinking about passing the wealth and business to the daughter as well because they only have one child. So that's a little bit different from the past. So they still can, yeah.
The passing the heritage to the males only, is it the legal issue? You cannot legally pass to the female descendant, or is it just about tradition?
It's a tradition, but it's also related. If you pass to the female, then because the female doesn't carry the family name, they carry their husband's name, then the share will be diluted. So that's one concern for the family business owners. Yeah.
So all your samples
Yeah.
are from Hong Kong or Singapore.
Yeah. So,
I wonder if have you compared the strategies that have been used by these family businesses with like Jardines or Swires or other Hong Kong or Singapore businesses that are non-Chinese? Of which there are I guess beyond.
Yeah, that's a
beyond.
very good question. In fact, we have thought about that, but we haven't had a chance to really compare the same because actually conduct those interviews is very time consuming. So
Again, our
yeah.
focus is on ethnic Chinese.
It's on ethnic Chinese.
On ethnic Chinese. This is why we want to do the comparisons.
Yeah.
And so the next target is Jewish.
Yeah.
And we also think the overseas or the so-called diaspora Indians.
Yeah.
That's another area where we're.
So those are our future
Yeah.
projects.
From a case
Yeah.
studies point of view, for example, Michael Jepson, you probably know him here in Hong Kong. We actually, so that's a separate thing. We don't put it together as a.
Yeah.
So we have cases, each case study itself. Yeah.
Armenians can be a good option also.
Okay.
Yeah.
If you know them, we will.
Yeah, we have.
We can do that collectively together.
I think connection guanxi is very important for us to get more information. Yeah.
All right, Winnie, thank you very much for the very interesting
Thank you.
talk.
Yeah.
I was wondering to what degree the persistence or short-livedness of the Chinese enterprise was a strategic decision. Because based on what I know, for instance, Taiwanese companies, these networks are long-lasting, but they come together, take advantage of a short-term opportunity through like a company, and kind of like take their money out and let the company die, but the network has gone on to the next company. So maybe the longevity of the corporate structure is maybe not the best way to look at the longevity of the networks and the people working together.
Your reason can be possible, but the example you chose is Taiwan. But I don't quite agree with because in Taiwan, due to political instability, it's actually very difficult for them to sustain the business. So they always think about quitting or leaving. Taiwan Island. So that's one biggest reason for the Taiwanese. They don't have a very long family business. Yeah.
Well, I must say, we did find
Yeah.
some,
Yeah.
okay, but our benchmark was 100 years, and
Yeah.
very few. And again, we arbitrarily chose 100 years and $100 million US, because we think the dynamics of those families are very, very different, let's say, some corner herbal shop. But yes, and it's actually, those are the companies we're able to interview. In reality, had we had access to all of them, there aren't that many. We actually could not find more than 20 that met our criteria on a global basis. So it's not just because of Hong Kong, Singapore, or whatever it is. Okay. Yeah.
Actually, I think that if you go into studying the Jewish families, probably the pattern can be quite close to what you mentioned, meaning that family wealth is separated from family business, and businesses do appear and disappear while family wealth is staying, which is more or less the case, for example, with Rothschilds,
Yeah, exactly.
who have never had proper incorporation of the whole estate, but who are close to the family and who have wealth, obviously.
And this comes again, what keeps the family together? Is it the family business that's the glue, or family wealth is the glue? What really brings the family together?
And in one of our case company, Winnie, actually they are now more into like a family office type of role because they are no longer the manager of those department store anymore. They simply just quit. They get the shares, but they ask somebody else to manage the business. Yeah.
May?
Yeah.
You mentioned the case about implementing family constitution. How typical is that for Chinese families, entrepreneurial families? For example, for Russia, it is absolutely untypical. We have, for our short base, we have one or two examples.
It's not typical at all. For the written family constitution, but doesn't mean that we don't have family constitution. A lot of things are actually unwritten. So due to, we can just apply to the Chinese tradition and values. In fact, we do have a family constitution, just not written, not like, Western legalistically the written document.
But is it a typical constitution for all Chinese entrepreneurial families? Or you mean some traditions that are within different families?
Yeah, they have to apply to the traditions, but they don't really write something out. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
Are there any last comments? Otherwise, we're right at the closing time. So why don't I close today's last session and thank the speakers for this
Thank you.
session.